Hello, movie nerds, and welcome back to Cinematic Sarcastic, the podcast that talks all things movies and television. I'm Natalie, and I'm your host. On today's episode, we are going to talk about Echo. You guys know already, if you've listened to me for any amount of time, that I am not a Marvel fan. I'm not a huge Marvel fan. I really enjoyed Phase 1. Pretty much that's it. I think I was talking to a friend earlier in the day about kind of once we defeated Thanos, that's when my enjoyment of Marvel films kind of took a nosedive. Like after that, it was just oversaturation. Everything started not to be as good. It just kind of felt more and more like a money grab. And Echo for me is worse than I thought it was going to be, which is kind of surprising. I went into Echo knowing that I probably wasn't really going to think that it was the most amazing thing ever. And being Disney, I knew that it probably wasn't going to be the most amazing thing ever. I don't think that Disney has put out anything truly great in a really long time, but I was sort of expecting Echo to at least be along the lines of Ahsoka, where the story maybe didn't make all that much sense, but the acting was mostly overall okay, if not a little wooden, and where the action scenes maybe made up for the lack of storytelling. And I didn't really even enjoy Ahsoka, but I was still expecting Echo to kind of be somewhere in that ballpark. Wow, was I wrong. This show is a lot worse than even I anticipated it being, and for really none of the same reasons that Ahsoka wasn't great. So even though I felt like Ahsoka struggled in the story, I think that Echo even more so does that, and you feel it a lot more because the pacing for Echo is so off and so strange. Like it speeds through some things, but draws out other less important things. It doesn't explain a lot of the plot that I feel like you kind of need in order to get invested in these characters. And they lean a lot heavier on the American Sign Language side of things than they do the Choctaw Nation things, which I found kind of interesting. Like with as much as everyone on the film has been virtue signaling the brave and stunning Disney for coming out with something that was inclusive and didn't discriminate against anyone, I really was sort of expecting them to do Echo justice in that they were going to make it sort of realistic in the way that the comic book sort of leaned more realistic. So if you look at the Echo comic book, she could read lips, right? Because I think the expectation there is that she knew that not everyone was going to know American Sign Language, so she read lips to be able to converse with people that wouldn't normally be able to do that. But if you look at the Echo television series, it's like all of these characters suddenly know American Sign Language, even the ones that you don't think would have. I think the only character that sort of didn't seem to know American Sign Language was Kingpin, and then he, for whatever reason, just had an ASL interpreter with him 24/7, 365 for like dinner dates and in his car, and his American Sign Language interpreter ended up looking a lot more like a villain than Kingpin did because they were lighting Kingpin, they were lighting Vincent D'Onofrio, but then keeping the interpreter kind of in the dark. So she kind of ended up looking, like Mr. Big when she was really not even a character at all. And then one of the things that I found the most frustrating is that they leaned so heavily on the American Sign Language aspect of things without bothering to think of the logistics of how that should be done. For instance, there are conversations that people are having with Echo where they are signing to her and she is not even looking at them, but she will answer back to them after they have signed to her. So even if she's not looking at the sign language, even if she's looking out the window or off in another direction, it's like she, with her mind, knows what the American Sign Language has been. And that was something that happened with some of the other characters as well. Like her parents in one of the very early scenes in the first episode, like they're using ASL to each other, but they're not looking at each other at all. Like they're facing two completely different directions and yet carrying on a conversation with ASL. And it just makes you sort of sit there and go, that's not how that works. Like if she was reading lips, that would make sense. And there were times when it almost seemed like, or I kind of assumed that she could read lips. Like her fight scene, her terrible, yes, it's as bad as the leaked footage was. I thought that was a joke. Turns out to be real. Her fight with Daredevil, he starts to just talk to her. And I get that he's blind, and so he isn't going to know or have any idea that she doesn't hear, you know, that he's speaking to nothing, essentially, because she can't hear what he's saying. But she almost seems to acknowledge what he's saying while they're doing this fight. But then later on in the same episode, she is going to see like a medical examiner or some sort of doctor that is going to help her with her gut shot, which would have killed her, by the way, just saying. And she does, like, the doctor says something to her that her friend cannot interpret. And she looks confused, like she has no idea what the doctor has said to her. So do you read lips? And do you understand what people are saying? Or do you not? Like, there just doesn't seem to be any consistency throughout the show as to what works and what doesn't. And I genuinely thought, like, you know, obviously Disney went in and changed the First Nations tribe that Echo was a part of. She is Cheyenne in the comic books. They thought that that was too stereotypically Native American, and so they changed her to the Choctaw tribe. But they don't really incorporate that in a way that I feel like kind of makes sense to the story. Like, I sort of expected them, because I knew that they had changed Echo's power. You know, the power that she has in the comic they thought was lame. That's been all over the news. And so I figured when they were changing her power, they were going to kind of look at the Choctaw Nation and go, okay, how can we incorporate maybe a new power in, incorporate that Native aspect in as well? But they didn't. It's like they just randomly throw stuff in that's part of like the creation myth of the Choctaw tribe, but they don't incorporate that in the story at all. And maybe they do in later episodes, because I will be completely honest, I did not make it past episode 1. The first episode was all over the place. It was slow as hell. It was boring as hell. I did not care about any of these characters. I do not plan to watch the rest. And for there to only be 5 episodes, definitely Disney released them all at the same time, because they knew if they were releasing one at a time, no one would even remember to come back and watch the rest of the show. You had to drop the entire thing in order to even have a dream of everyone watching all 5 episodes. And I doubt that the majority of people are going to do that. I think potentially if you are okay, or you have kept up with like every single Marvel show, TV series, movie, everything, that maybe you would watch Echo just to like keep up with the story that's being told. I had heard in the first episode the majority of it just comes from Hawkeye, but I couldn't even tell which parts were supposed to come from Hawkeye or not, because I never did watch the Hawkeye stuff. Like, I never did see that. So to me, it was like he showed up randomly for no reason and was talking to her, and I didn't understand how that incorporated in it. It's like stuff just happens randomly, and it doesn't, for me, make sense as to why those things are happening. Like, Echo to me was just a mess. It wasn't even borderline a cohesive story, the way that even Ahsoka was mostly cohesive, and that I don't even consider good. So if what I don't even consider good, if you're not even hitting that bar, I'm definitely not giving you 5 episodes of my time. Like, that's just not happening. I don't even know. I mean, at this point, I genuinely am concerned that like Disney doesn't want to stay in business. Like, I don't know what Disney is doing right now. Like, Disney used to be the company that you knew that whatever they were putting out was going to be something good. And that has not been the case for more than 10 years now. And I do not see that turning around clearly with them just continuing to double down on the things that we are telling them we are not interested in and still expecting us to show up and love them. And I know for a fact that the issue is not the people in the show. You know, I know that Vincent D'Onofrio is a great actor. I know that Graham Greene is a great actor. I know for a fact that Tantu Cardinal is a great actor. So the fact that they are mediocre in this series tells me it's not them. It is the series. So those are my thoughts on Echo. I would love to know what you guys thought of this series. If you are giving it a shot, subscribe if you want to join the Movie Nerd family, and I hope to see you in the next episode.